All right, welcome back to another episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast. I'm your co-host Shay, and sitting down with me, as always, is Cassie. Today, we're going to be talking about something interesting behind the scenes, something we did. So we're going to be talking about how we use experimentation, and this is something we love talking about with our clients and really encouraging other entrepreneurs. And we'll kind of talk about our own journey to even getting to a place of comfortability with experimenting. But we experimented last year with a new offer. And so today we want to talk about how you can use experimentation to test, launch new offers. So this one offer actually made us over six figures, and we'll talk about that and talk about the different things that went into behind the scenes of what we did for this offer and how you can replicate that for your own experimentation within your offer suite and your offer ladder. So, hey, Cass, welcome to the podcast and the conversation today.
Hello, hello. Hey, everyone. I also wanted to say sorry that we didn't record an episode or drop our episode last week. I was so sick, covered in hives, just to give you guys a really gross picture. It was awful, and I was in no place to be recording a podcast episode for you guys. So I called it a grace week. If you guys can give me some grace when life lifes, I told Shay, I'm like, hey, girl, just I can't sit and record. So sorry about that, but really excited for today's episode and feeling so much better, so much more energized. And like my brain is here, Shay. So that's a good thing.
I need your brain here, present. Also, kind of funny story as well. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll record like a solo episode for us. And I sat down and I tried. I really did, ladies. I really tried to record you an episode, but it was so awkward to me trying to have a podcast episode where I'm just talking to the screen and there's no one else. And I realized all of the episodes that we've done on the Freedom Filled Life podcast have either been Cassie and I, or I've interviewed someone. So my style, if we're just thinking experimenting, I tried it. My style is definitely not recording podcasts into the ether. I need someone to bounce conversation off of. So we are here together today.
I think it really is a special skill to talk to yourself while talking to an audience. I'm happy to be back, and I have lots of thoughts on today's conversation. So let's get into it. As you were saying, we really started experimenting in business, I would say probably like a good 2 years ago. And we won't go that far because I do want to stay focused on this specific topic. But let's start with like the big question. I think, why do you think so many business owners overcomplicate launching a new offer? And that could be anything from an online course, a membership, a program. Usually that's where our clients are coming to us with wanting to launch something new. It's not typically a new service, I think, doesn't require as much of a heavy lift to get something going. It's just like creating a package. But I think when you're creating, a program, membership, course, something that's a bit more content heavy, we consider that quote unquote a launch. So why do you think so many business owners overcomplicate this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one kind of comes down to this feeling of like, I need to have the perfect outline, the perfect plan, the blueprint, the thing that's going to get me to these financial goals that I'm trying to achieve with this. I think we kind of want to create almost in this perfect bubble, because at least this was for me. I wanted to be able to think through and have this really strategic plan and have all the pieces in place, and then have this like utter confidence that like, oh, I'm going to hit this exact number. And so I think that sometimes we give ourselves almost, I think it's called like Parkinson's law, I want to say, we give ourselves almost too much time, too much runway sometimes to build something out and to overthink it and to create all of the systems, all of the funnel, create all the content, especially in something like a program, a course, anything that is you creating content for the thing that you're going to launch, versus like what Cass was saying with services. You want to create all the content ahead of time. Sometimes that's just based off of not even knowing what your audience necessarily even wants yet. But I would say that it's this like, I need to have all the pieces, everything in place, ready to go, so I can just click a button and hit launch, and then boom, let's get into it. So I'd say that's one of the things that I see primarily when it comes to why people hold themselves back. But what are your thoughts, Cass?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that you were talking about just our own experience because I feel like our approach to developing a new program or new course in the past was really time intensive and very intensive on our team. And it could take us, 6 months to a year to develop something new, launch it. Then, of course, there's all this pressure around the launch because, let's say you and your team have been spending 3, 6, 12 months on creating something new, creating a launch plan. And if it doesn't go exactly to plan, it doesn't hit the numbers that you want it to hit, I feel like the pressure and the disappointment is so much higher because there is just such a higher stake involved. And not that I think it's a something that can't work, and again, this isn't a blanket statement that you shouldn't be spending 6 months, 12 months developing an idea. I just think that it's worth talking about the other kind of path you can take, which is what you and I started doing, which is still like you and I are recovering perfectionists, right? We're not saying that we just like threw a sales page up there and just started selling something willy-nilly. Really, it has come from, I think, a really intensive structure, paring that down to what are just the essential pieces of a new program that we need to launch it. And we'll talk about what those are later on in today's episode. Like, what are those core pieces? And then how can we learn by doing? And how can we get better by doing? Because I think overcomplicating just takes a long time, right? And you're trying to approach things and it's very theoretical. It's like, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? And I think you and I started feeling like, well, it's cart before the horse. We want to have real clients go through the program, get real feedback from them, make real adjustments, real refinements, make it better, not based off of what you and I think our clients need, but what they need and what they're saying that they need. And so I think that's kind of been the new approach where if you are spending 6 to 12 months developing a program or a product, if it's only you or your team creating that, I would just caution you that it's still an idea. It's still theoretical. Even if people or clients or potential clients have been saying they want something, it's still all based off a concept. It's still ideation, even as you're trying to build something new. And I think we've sort of learned the hard way a lot of times that, why don't we take ideas that we're getting from clients and kind of like put it to, what's the terminology? Like put it to the fire. What's the word?
I don't know.
I can't think called. Put it to the test, put fuel to the fire, something like that. There's some sort of saying, but let's test it. Let's really see if this is what people are willing to pay for, if this is what people want. And then at the end of the day, if they're getting results from it. And I think that you can come to a successful new program or new offer faster with more ease. And also, in my opinion, have a better outcome because you're building it along the process, refining it along the process. Let's say if you were to take this structure, that means that anything after the 60 days from the first launch basically becomes us continuing to develop and refine our program for an entire year based off of real clients and real situations, real experiences, real feedback, real testimonials versus you and I theoretically building a program for 12 months. And I think that's why we have been able to be so successful with this new offer and generate over 6 figures because we did it in this process.
Yeah. And also kind of something that sort of came to mind as you were talking was the idea, if we go back to the question that you were asking around like what holds someone back, I would say having worked with clients in the past who wanted to launch an online course, they thought that they needed to basically build the entire content and all of the course content and materials before they launched it. And while, yes, that's what you and I have done, obviously, but learning from experience, my actual advice now is that you don't need to build the whole thing. You just need to have an outline a roadmap, and then you can actually drip out content versus some, people think the whole course, at least the first time, already made. But if you do something more so like drip out content and create content more in real time, what's amazing about that is that, like what Cass was saying, you're getting real-time feedback as well. So of course, having an outline of structure so someone knows what they're purchasing and what like the results are from A to Z that they're going to get in this course doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to have the content created. You just have to know that you have the knowledge to create on those topics. But you can get real-time feedback and also take the pressure off of content creating before we launch. And then also accountability. So going back to the Parkinson's law of timing, because I was so bad for this, I have so much time to create the course before the launch, and I would spread all of that out. Whereas when I started doing drip content for our program, it was so much more achievable and attainable to have like a deadline, accountability, and like know that I just need to create the next lesson, the next module, the next thing that comes. And I'm doing it also in real time on feedback. And I just have to say, as a course creator, that model, I didn't even realize how much that model for me just brought me so much ease and joy. And you get dialed in, you cut the fluff. You're like, okay, yeah, I need to record this next week. I need to teach this next week. What are the things I need to include? Versus, like I said, going back to overthinking, if I had a ton of time, then the overthinking would come in. You almost do too much. And the quality was the same in a sense of like there was no lost quality of doing it in this drip content structure, which I think was the biggest realization for me as well, because I always thought that the longer the time, the higher the quality.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I also think before we dive into just like what the program is, what we launched, what the launch structure was, all the nitty gritty things that we want to share in today's episode, I think it is also good for anybody, who's listening. If you are in a growth or scaling stage of your own service-based business, it's just helpful to know that I think experimenting and what we're talking about in today's episode is especially relevant to you as you're building out your product ladder. I don't think that we're always experimenting. We don't sit down and we're just like every month, like, what's a new experiment? What's something new we can sell? What's something new we can do? We talked about this in a previous episode about the real reasons you're not hitting your revenue goals. And like, we really do double down on what works. You're developing what is a very strong signature product ladder, and then you stick with that and you get better at it unless something significantly changes in your industry or you decide to make a business shift. But typically we're seeing our product ladder out at least 5, maybe even 7 years, to be honest. And again, that's with an asterisk of, what goes on in the industry. We don't know what's coming in the future. So you want to avoid doing too many things and having too many offers. I'm not saying you should just start experimenting with a bunch of different offers this week or this month. But if you are in the stage of your business that you are still developing your product ladder, typically those are like the 3 things, your signature 3 offers that you do and you do really well, then I think this process that we're going to talk about today, or this launch and just experimenting, can be such an effective approach, because I think you'll get to your ideal version of your product ladder and what's working a lot faster. Okay, so let's talk about how we launched this new offer and without overthinking it, and what actually this offer was. What was the idea? What problem were we solving? I know, we kind of had this idea floating around for a little while in our heads. You and I were sort of talking about, a quote unquote replacement to our Buckless Bombshells Academy, serving women in the launch stage of our business, but we hadn't really fleshed it out. Can you share, just from your perspective, what made us finally decide to go for it and do it in this faster way?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was starting to come up, because as you mentioned, we had closed the Buckless Bombshells Academy, which was for our stage in business of women who want to launch a business. And we had Scale with Purpose Mastermind as our group coaching program. And that was running, but that's not the right stage, obviously. For launching, we had this amazing audience, amazing community. And what they were saying to me, I was having real conversations with them. They were asking, what are you going to now create? We shared with them that this was no longer like the way that we felt was the best way to help women launch an online business. I brought this to Cass's attention and, there's still a large percentage of our community that keeps asking and they want to launch a business. But the biggest thing that they also were saying was they didn't want a course. So it wasn't like they wanted us to create a new course, which was cool because that was, in alignment with what we wanted. Because of the landscape had changed. This is all like post-pandemic. The landscape had changed. They didn't feel that they needed to learn quote unquote skills, which was a foundation of what we used to teach. They felt like they wanted to transition their corporate careers, if they were marketing managers, if they were graphic designers, website designers, whatever they were already doing inside of their corporate careers, they want to transition that and work for themselves. But they wanted a customized, hands-on approach to doing that so that in somewhere that they could ask questions. And so I didn't really know what that looked like because it needed some foundation of content, some sort of framework, lessons. It wasn't just a coaching program where that kind of style is so different than having a step-by-step outline of teaching. And so that's when Cass and I started kind of brainstorming and figuring out and created what I like to call this hybrid approach to what Launch Camp ended up becoming, where we could have a framework, we could still have lesson content, but the lesson content was recorded for that cohort in real time. And it had the framework of creating a business plan around it. So very clear, like next steps, action items, homework, accountability, all the things that they were sharing with us. And so when it came to deciding to experiment, it came out of this really clear need of what it could look like. And then being like, well, okay, how are we going to go about delivering that? And then that's, I think, probably when we started when we decided we'd do it drip style and that kind of thing, which made it easier in terms of like what we wanted to sell. We didn't have to recreate in a sense. Like I said, we create the outline, we create the concepts, we create what the results are going to be or the goal of the program. So we had just this really open-minded approach to trying something, but also we didn't say this is the thing that is going to be in our product ladder forever. It was, we're doing this one time. And that also allows for experimentation because we're like, okay, well, because a client, and maybe many of you listening can have experienced this, someone can tell you they want something. That does not mean that they will actually purchase it from you when you create it. So that can also be really frustrating, especially like we're saying, if you spent like 6 to 12 months on creating something for, these people that said they wanted that. It wasn't something that was, okay, now we need to revamp our marketing, revamp our product ladder, rechange anything. It wasn't a hard pivot. It was an experimentation of, will this work? Is this the way that we want to serve? And let's see what results we can get for people before we decide that this is the right path. So that's what I would say in terms of kind of where it came up.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I do think that kind of like less pressure, I don't say no pressure, but, less pressure of just saying like, this isn't meant to be, you're not creating it because it's meant to guarantee that it's going to stay in your product ladder, that you're going to love it, that it's going to be successful. Like, I think there's just too many pieces that go into an offer, a successful offer in your product ladder, honestly. And I think you can, like you said, you can get close-minded. I think if you're so stuck and so focused on, this offer has to work, it has to be this way, because I think that then you're not leaving room for your clients to give feedback and for just the business to be able to naturally and more easily go in the direction that your client and your audience wants it to go. It's at the end of the day, like there are still things that you're learning, even us, like we've been in business for 11 years. There's still things to learn with launching a new product. And so I totally agree that doing the offer this way really allowed for that ease. I also like that you were talking about, how we started developing the structure of this program, which for anybody who knows our programs well, this program is our launch camp program, just to put a name to it in case anybody was curious. Totally forgot to mention that earlier in the conversation. But I think when you're starting to figure out what a new offer is that you want to create, sometimes we have clients come to us and they're like, I want to create a small group program, or I want to create a membership, or I want to create a course. And I think it's great if you have an idea or direction of the vehicle in which you want to serve. But I also think that it's really important sometimes to take a step back and not even think about the vehicle. Like, that's just deliverability, you know? Sit down and think about, what do you want someone, like your clients, what do you want them to achieve in this program or in this offer, in this structure? What do you want them to learn? How long is that going to take? Is that going to take 4 weeks? Is that going to take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks? How long, ideally, is it going to take for somebody to get results or go through your process, go through your framework? And then you can start thinking about, okay, based off of what, came up in that conversation, what is the best deliverability method or mechanism for, this offer? And so for us, for Launch Camp, like you were saying, Shay, it really was this hybrid of, we know that women still need the knowledge, they need to learn, and they need content. So that's where, some of our skill set in having been course creators came to be. But we also know that these women who are still juggling 9 to 5s are busy. So they can't sit on a 3-hour call every week. Their time is so important. So let's teach them in a manner that they can learn at any time in the week that works for them. And then for accountability and further, applying it and make it really customized to them, answering their questions, breaking through any barriers. Every single week, we have a small group coaching program to dive in further into that topic. And then also very clear homework every single week. So there's no question marks or flailing around of like, where should I go? What should I do from now? Am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to be working on that? It is a very structured framework. And then the last piece, or I guess 2 other pieces I would bring up, is the time. I think we settled on 8 weeks. And again, that was an experiment for us. We wanted to see, like, 4 weeks is way too short to launch a business. 6 weeks felt too short when we started laying out the framework. Like, what do we want to teach each week? Couldn't fit into a 6-week structure. So 8 weeks felt like this perfect sweet spot where we can achieve everything we want to achieve, but it also doesn't feel so overwhelming that it's going to take too long in somebody's current situation to launch a business. We're not talking about a 6-month commitment. We're talking about, can you commit 8 weeks? For a lot of women who have gone through Launch Camp or interested in Launch Camp, time is just such a valuable asset and very, very limited for them. So this is a point of contention when we are marketing and selling the program. So I feel like the 8 weeks also, luckily for us in this experiment, worked out well, but that would have been something that we would have adapted, I think, if that piece of it wasn't fitting. And then I think the last kind of key piece there was like limiting the number of spots. And we talk about this a lot, you and I, with our clients as well, is like, this isn't just a number that you pull out of the air. And I think it's also really important to not just launch something new and not have any financial forecast around it either. It's very helpful for your mental sanity. And I think also for your business to understand, what are the goals you have around launching this new offer? And also, how feasible are those goals? Where are these numbers coming from? And I think that happens with our clients as well. We have clients come to us that want to launch, a 6-figure small group program. And we're like, okay, awesome. What is the price point of the new offer? And does that make sense for what you're offering and what the value is? And also what competitors are selling something similar for? Can your audience or clients afford that? And then that helps us answer, how many spots do you need to fill in this program? Because, I know, Shay, especially since you really lead and drive the sales aspect of our business, I think it can be it's just overwhelming and confusing if you're just like, sell as many spots as possible. You know, like, yes, of course. Like, yeah, make as much money as you possibly can. Like, yes. But when we think about it, there's actual metric. How many women do we think should be in this program when we're running it? You know, what makes sense? What can we handle? What makes sense for, you know, the fact that we have a group coaching call every single week, and we do want to have individual hot seats and an individual touch point with everyone. It's a big part of the program. It's not possible to run 100 women in this type of program. You know, not everybody could have a hot seat. It wouldn't be possible. You would need to change the structure. So I think it's really important to, when you're creating and developing a new offer, to sit down and look at the financial metrics behind it, do some financial forecasting, which is also what we did, and how we figured out how many spots we wanted to fill, the price point that we wanted to be at, and kind of like go from there when it comes to what our initial goals were for the very first launch. Another interesting side fact, I remember, Shay, when you and I were on our Scale with Purpose retreat that year, when we were considering launching Launch Camp. Sorry for just a lot of launching in this conversation, but we were considering launching Launch Camp. It was still an idea in our heads. And I remember sitting down with one of our clients. We were actually at the beach on our Scale with Purpose retreat. So for our other program, and one of our clients was asking us, like, oh, are you thinking of launching any other programs? And just like, you know, a lot of curiosity about what we're doing behind the scenes. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny that you asked. We are actually thinking of creating a new entry-level program for women who want to launch a business. It kind of replaces our Bucket List Bombshells Academy. And I started sharing with her, you know, sort of the concepts that we were running through. We had an initial idea for the name, which is not, I can't even remember what it was, but it was not Launch Camp. And I remember her being like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And just starting to give all this feedback, like, oh, you could have this. And I remember when I first launched my business, I wish I had that. And I wish somebody gave me more, you know, mindset tips. And I wish somebody explained to me this about launching a website. And she's like, I'm not too sure about that name. It kind of makes me feel like XYZ. Again, I don't remember what it was. And I was sitting there thinking like, wow, it's so helpful. If you have existing clients or even past clients, you can just really tap into them to help validate your ideas before launching, especially in our structure of a business. You know, this particular client, she's already launched a business and she has gone through that experience. She has launched a business for the first time herself. She knows the feelings, the fears, the struggles, the strategies she wished she knew. So it's almost like I was able to talk to someone further along in their experience, and obviously somebody who really gives transparent feedback to us, which is amazing. And from that conversation, I remember you and we had gotten back to our villa at the Scale with Purpose retreat. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to sit down and write down all these things that I had just had from this conversation, because it really did start to speed up and validate the idea process and start to create this structure around Launch Camp and our new offer. I think that's also where we started really having a lot more fuel to this idea. And we were like, okay, we need to bring this to life. So let's talk about, Shay, some of the kind of must-haves that you need in place to launch a new offer. Since we are talking about cutting down such a extensive launch, you know, we need your sales page, we need some pricing figured out, but also make sure that we're not missing things as well.
Oh, yeah. I would say that if I was thinking in terms of our framework that we use, I'd start with the program itself, making sure that we have, you know, like we've kind of been chatting about this whole time, we need to know, regardless program, course, membership, when we're developing this new offer, what is the entry level? Where are they coming in at? What's the problem that you're going to solve? And how are they exiting out? What is the timeline? Like we talked about, ours was, you know, 8-week program. It could be a 3-month program. It could be a recurring membership. It could be a course that's self-paced. You need to decide the length of time that it's going to take someone to go through and then get the result. And what is the result? So those are kind of like the core things I would say that you want to think through when it comes to what it is. So have that first. This is always chicken before the egg for me. It's like, do you have the program first or who is it for first? So I think they kind of go hand in hand. So I'd also say when we're creating the program, it's like, who are we creating the program for? So again, going back to their pain points and then the results that you can get, what stage are they at in their business or in the way that you serve them, really knowing who they are, and so that you know how we're going to sell to them or how we're going to market to them. So again, it doesn't have to be something super in depth because we've been sort of talking about selling to the audience that we already have. If you know your audience well enough, you've been having these conversations, like we should have an easy kind of outline of who we are creating this for, because if we have a program idea, it's typically because we're solving a problem for someone. And then I like to think about, okay, well, then we think about this, if it's going to be limited spots or unlimited spots, because then we probably want to think about the capacity, as Cass was saying, what's your capacity or your team's capacity to execute on this? Are you creating it ahead of time or are you dripping it out? Obviously, you guys know I'm now leaning towards dripping out. So you do kind of want to know what is your rough timeline for if you had to create content before you launched it. I would say caveat there is I do recommend doing a drip out method. And so then you want to look at the spots, your capacity for executing it, and then so that you can get into the finances. So you can look and forecast and do some pricing research. And Cass talked about this earlier with the market, with what your clients, your target audience budgets are going to be, what their price sensitivity is, and then also obviously the value of what you are bringing into the program. Find that sweet spot, get your pricing, get your number of spots available, either unlimited or X amount, and then set some good, better, best goals. So we always like to have a range. And I think it then allows for you to have really conservative goals. So that's what we call our good. So typically what I do there is I take half of our average conversion rate as when I'm launching something new as my very conservative amount, so that I kind of know that I have realistic expectations, I guess is why I do it. So then we have our better goal. So I usually do what is my average conversion rate, and then good, better, best. My best goal is I usually do something sometimes double my average, ooh, it's kind of pushing me out there. And it's always so fun, obviously, to hit your best goal. But I'm going to be realistic with you ladies. I typically average between our good and better goals especially for a new launch. But even I don't want you guys thinking set a best goal and just set it for fun. Okay. So don't get too hung up sometimes on those numbers. And then from there, let's go into your sales funnel structure. So again, sometimes marketing, sales, Cass is marketing and sales. So for us, it's very it can kind of happen simultaneously. But I think for me, I'd probably go sales funnel. How am I selling it? So for us, it was going to be on sales calls, much different than how we sell courses. So you might not need to do sales calls. Again, it depends on the type of product. So think about your sales funnel. Obviously, you'll need a sales page. Everybody will need a sales page no matter what the offer is. So even if you did something like a version 1, and you did the what, the results, the how, what's in it, and the way that it's delivering, some FAQs. And then from there, it's okay, are you doing sales calls? Or are you doing direct to checkout? Because that is probably going to affect the marketing strategy. Now, typically, if you have limited spots, most likely you're going to be doing an application sales call because from my perspective, there's so limited spots. You want to make sure that the person who is taking a spot in your program is the best fit for you to get them the results of your program, which is much different than a strategy around memberships or courses, DIY courses. That strategy is much more you're creating for a mass audience. And so you have to work on making sure that your strategies are applicable to a very wide range. So then we have our sales funnel. Then we would go into our marketing plans. I think the two places there are going to be primarily email marketing. If you have an email list, ideally you have an email list for this offer, and then any organic marketing that you already do, wherever your audience is, wherever the target audience is. But basically, when we get down to the marketing plan, we're probably going to look at doing open and close style, especially if you have limited spots, but an open and close style launch structure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's helpful. Let's talk about the launch timeline and what that looks like. So on my end, like Jay said, I usually am kind of like along with Shay leading the launch timeline. Like how long is the launch going to be? What are the different phases of a launch? And again, this works really well for memberships, for courses, and for small group programs. We have a very similar structure for marketing. Even our small live group program like Launch Camp, just like we did for courses, just the sales funnel is different, like Shay already talked about. So I think anytime that we're launching something new, we always like to have a wait list. And it's really important that you start building excitement, hype, energy, get people just in the know that you're even developing something exciting for them, because you want to have that excitement and hype for when you actually go to hit your first day of launch. You know, when you open applications, in our case for Launch Camp, it was basically applications being open that people could start applying, getting on a sales call, and then taking one of those limited spots that we had available. So that's another piece of urgency in our case that for any type of offer is from a sales and marketing perspective is really important. What is the urgency that somebody has to do this now? Because we can always put things off and just decide like, oh, we'll wait till next time, next year. And so you want to have some urgency in your launch in general. So we started with a wait list, and I think timing as well is something that we can talk about too, like where you're at in the year. Like what month is it? What week is it? And when are you planning on doing your launch? So for us, we wanted to launch Camp for the very first time in January of 2024. That was when our first cohort started. And again, it's a live group program, so has very specific start and end dates. Applications also close on a specific day because, you know, we're getting started. We're starting the program. So when we were working backwards with wanting to have a January launch, then you start thinking about the wait list, and you're like, okay, well, if you start building a wait list at mid or end of December, like it's Christmas, it's the holidays, people are really busy, and people are not really, no, there could be a case made for that. Some people are starting to think about the new year. I think especially in the last couple of years, people are, in our audience anyways, are really trying to be present over the holidays, present with their family, disconnect, get offline, like not be online, put down the to-do list, things like that. So we decided to start our wait list even earlier in the month, or technically end of November really is when we started our wait list. So we ran our wait list end of November through early December to just start getting women in our audience really excited about what was coming and starting to put their name on a wait list to be the first to know when enrollment opens. So anytime we do a wait list, that is the sort of benefit that we offer people in our audience. And especially if you have people who are really excited to get their hands on something, we always will send out the offer to our waitlist first. So they are the first to know, which gives them, again, a heads up, and it gives them first access to apply and snag a spot if they're interested. So we had 67 applications during our waitlist period, which was so exciting. I will be totally honest. It's a new program. It's a new format. We used to have courses. This is like a small live group program, totally different structure. We have no idea at the end of the day what the response is going to be, which is, you know, exactly everything we've been talking about in this conversation. You want to be able to do something intentionally, but do it quick, because we want to see how all these pieces, like you were just talking about, Shay, there are a lot of pieces that go into a launch and creating a new offer, bringing it to market. And so many of those pieces have to work simultaneously so well, I think, for a new offer to take off and be really successful. And so you're able to do something quick It helps you figure out where there's gaps, improve on them, and then do it better. But for us, the waitlist and application period were both very successful. So I was really excited about that. Also, in the application kind of period of the launch, when somebody is applying, we're also asking them, what's the biggest thing holding you back right now from launching a business? And why do you want to launch a business? And so in the process of launching something new, we're also getting really, really insightful feedback from potential clients of why they want to enroll in this program, and much deeper than just like, oh, I just want to learn from you. People share with us big desires that they have in their life, how they want to be able to show up for their family, financial goals that they have, dreams that they have for a dream lifestyle, just so many really insightful things when it comes to being able to really identify with your ideal clients or your dream clients and also see them as individual people. Like, yes, I say 67 applications, but those are 67 women who took the time to fill out in quite a lot of detail, most of them, why they were interested in joining Launch Camp. And so that was another validation point, I think, for the idea of being like, this is wanted. And we have women who are, on our email list who really want this program or interested in this program. So I would say for like the first part of our launch phases, to me, that was like a really successful piece that was validated in the process. So from there, we decided to then have an early bird phase. I think early bird is also really common with a new program or a new offer, really. You see this in memberships with like founders pricing. It's like, how can you give people, it's sort of your way of saying thank you to people who are willing to take that first chance on you with something new. And I think early bird pricing or founders member pricing or even extra bonuses, it doesn't always have to be a price discount, is a really great way to incentivize people who are on the fence but know that there's no testimonials for this specific program. Now, of course, for us, we have been in business for 11 years. So we have lots of success stories from our online courses. And, women want to learn from us the success of our own business. But still, at the end of the day, a new program or a new offer is new. So there's no specific case studies or success stories off that. And I think early bird phases of a launch really can drive more signups, more sales in that period because you're incentivizing people again and just like building that excitement. So we did that for the first 2 weeks of December. I think we ended on December 15th. It was like right before people just go into full holiday mode. And then we completely went offline because, for those who follow us pretty closely, like you and I, Shay, we have BB holidays that we want to disconnect and be present for with our family. So we basically just stopped the launch. Like, of course, somebody went to the page, you could still apply for the wait list. It's not closed or anything, but we're not sending any emails. We're not taking sales calls during Christmas or anything like that. It's just the launch paused. And then we came back hot January 2nd, the very beginning of the new year. So this was 2024. And the last phase, or I guess I could say second to last phase, would be our regular pricing. So that's just like, if we had early bird or we did have early bird pricing for our first launch, then it moves to regular pricing, regular enrollment for around 2 weeks in January. And then the very last couple of days of our launches is always like, it's closing. We call it cart close or whatever terminology you want to give it. But that's a really hard, applications are closing. The program is closing. Again, hard urgency at the end, which is very common. We're talking about launches today in general. This is very common for what we call an open close cart launch, which means that like when somebody is in a different time period, if they had come to us, in October, they couldn't have applied for the program. Or if they came to us later in January, the program was already started. So open close cart, I think, especially for you and I, it's something that we did a lot with our online courses, it works really well because there's that hard deadline of urgency at the end. So that's the general launch timeline, the phases, the thought process that went through it. And then I would say too, email marketing, like you were saying, Shay, for us anyways, and especially for this particular launch, was our primary marketing funnel or like funnel driver. And that's because we already have an audience built. We have people who are waiting to enroll in our programs. And I think that is an amazing thing that obviously we're very blessed to have, having been in business so long. So for us, that's kind of like the big driver that we can pretty much solely rely on email marketing along with, posting in our Facebook groups and doing our Instagram light strategy. But the primary way we're driving applications, especially for this program, was through email marketing. The last point too, I want to make when it comes to like using email marketing as a primary marketing or sales driver, if you have an audience, of course, to sell a new offer to. Sometimes our clients will ask us like, okay, like how many emails should I send in a launch period? If our launch period was late November through mid-January, that's like quite a long time. For this first launch that we did for Launch Camp, we sent 15 total emails, which I actually think is on the lighter side when I was looking at emails. For us, that's on the lighter side of how many emails. But I think that's because we paused for the holidays or we would have had more emails than this. And so one of the things clients are always like, oh my gosh, so surprised that there are so many emails that you're sending out. Like, aren't people going to get, bored or tired or just like annoyed at you sending so many emails? Two things I would say to that. The first is that there are stats that people need to see an offer 7 times before purchasing. And from an email marketing perspective, we're also not just saying the same thing for 15 emails, right? Those are, I think of it like 15 opportunities. If a potential client for this new offer was sitting across from me having coffee and they were asking me questions, those are 15 different opportunities or perspectives that I have to sell them this new offer and why they need it. So that could be telling them a story, that could be giving them client testimonials or case studies, that could be talking about their fears or pain points, that could be talking about strategies. Basically, there's kind of a science when it comes to email marketing and launches. And so you're sending a high volume of emails. And for us, we always, which I'm very grateful for, maintain a really high open rate, even during launches. So that leads me to believe that our audience wants to read these emails. They want to hear them. And again, this is our primary way that we are driving applications and driving sales for our Launch Camp program. And again, in this, the first time we launched it as well. So we need to double down in this area, which is why there's a high volume of emails being sent. Okay, Shay, let's shift a little bit to talking about how we've been able to make Launch Camp better every time that we've ran it, because I think this is a big part of experimenting and why experimenting works.
Yeah, I think this has been actually one of my favorite things. Surprisingly, because I just was really nervous as a recovering perfectionist to be in the experimenting mode with content. And what I thought was just so cool was that when you are able to give yourself that space, to drip it out. In this scenario, we had a coaching element, which meant that I got basically real-time feedback in the sense of if one of my clients was not getting from the lesson what I wanted her to understand from the lesson, it was so clear to me. But that client doesn't drop off. In a course structure, that client drops off and you don't hear from them and they don't get the results from your course. I'm not saying courses are bad. I'm just saying, and this is from my experience as a course creator. This was such a cool experience to be like, oh, okay, I can coach her through this. That's what the hot seats are for. Great. She's going to still get the results out of this program. But now I can make a note and say, okay, when I do that lesson in the next round, I want to teach it in this way that I just coached her through, so that it is being taught to everyone. Has different personalities. not everyone is going to look and see the same things the way that you see them or how you teach them. And this was so cool to basically being really mindful and saying, oh, wow, okay, let me reteach that in a different way so that I don't have to spend as much time coaching someone through when we can, so that's what I like about the hybrid program too, is that it's just that finding that balance of like, what can you teach in a lesson that they understand? And then what do they need from you for coaching when it comes to helping them as well get the results? And so I thought that was really, really great and really cool. And then you also see, like we talked about a little bit about like timing and timeline. How long does someone need to get to the result that you want to complete the thing and move on to the next stage? And then also, what are the roadblocks? So again, going to our coaching calls, sometimes there would be unexpected mindset roadblocks that would come up. I would coach them through it. And what I could do is take notes and add that and add more resources to the next program to, again, reduce how much I have to individually coach and create a program that is structured for the ideal client to get everything they need from the lesson, the homework guidance, and then still the hot seat call for even deeper dive, things that are so customized you can't teach to someone. That's the beauty of having a coaching aspect, is like you get to have that tailored aspect so tailored for the client experience to get the results. And so as you're listening to me, you're probably realizing like what I do is I take a note. So every week I'm really keeping a pulse on what's going on and what I want to improve, but I don't get stressed out about trying to improve it during the program. So if you are live dripping out content, especially for us, we have a coaching aspect, or if you have a Q&A aspect, if you have some touch point where you're still able to help that person achieve the result, but you don't need to go and then redo the program course right then and there. You take notes, and then that before you open it again, you make those improvements. And that's what I've really, really enjoyed, because it has now, by the end, by doing it 3 times, by that 3rd time, I feel like that's the sweet spot. It's like, ooh, like this program is dialed in, and that feels so good. And then you move, I think, out of experimentation phase and into, delivering. You've experimented, you created, and now you have the framework or the program, the offer that is working so well. You just dial that in. And maybe over time, there's still, refinements here and there, but I think that you do need to exit out of experimenting, and you're more into like, okay, great, I have this offer, it's validated, it's there, I know who wants it, who needs it, I get results for them. And now it's a part of our offer, our suite, or our product ladder as well. So that to me is kind of like the results of experimentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great that you brought up, the first time was an experiment. And then from there, in our case, it was a very successful experiment. And so we then had a conversation of what makes sense to integrate this into our product ladder as a whole. How does this fit into launches for the rest of the year? And you really start thinking a bit more long term. But I think going back to what we said in the beginning of this conversation is like, we were not really worried about that or thinking about that in the experimentation phase or even in the development phase. It's too much before you really know what's going to work, or if it's going to work, or what changes need to be made. So I think it's great that you brought that up. In wrapping up this conversation, we do have a free resource for you if you are curious. I know I went into quite a bit of detail around just like the email strategy and email launch side of this specific launch. In the freebie, I'll walk you through how we structured our launch from that waitlist period to early bird to regular enrollment and cart close. What were those high converting email templates that we use? Going into just like the subject line, the call to actions, kind of some of the content in those emails, the psychology and strategy behind each of those emails to get your ideal customers to want to buy from you or apply, depending on what your offer is. So I'll share with you why we sent each email, what the goal behind it was, and how that particular email drives conversions. And then I'll also cover what to send to your audience or to your list in each of those phases so that you can maximize conversions and obviously sales. hopefully for your new offer. So basically, if you're curious to actually see the strategy behind our email launch framework for this particular launch of Launch Camp and our new offer, potentially you're wanting to sell your next new program or new offer with more ease, of course, probably generate a six-figure launch as well, then you can get access to that freebie, free resource by going to the link in our show notes.
Amazing. Well, this was another great conversation. Again, if anybody has any questions, I'm in the Instagram DMs. Come and drop me a note in there. What do you think of the episode? Are you launching something new? Is there something you want us to talk about on the next episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast? I'm in there in the Instagram DMs. And then, of course, always a friendly ask to drop us a review, leave us a review on either Apple or Spotify. We are so grateful for all of the ones that have been left recently. Thank you so, so much. And I hope that everybody enjoys the rest of their day. And we will see you on another episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast. So enjoy and bye for now.